Great. Thank you all for joining us today. This is the final day of our 2025 DD Council Training and Technical Assistance Institute. Our theme this year is Shaping the Future. My name is Cheryl Matney, and I have the privilege of serving as the director of the Training and Technical Assistance Information Center. We tend to call that ITAC, but in the spirit of trying to reduce our use on acronyms, this is your training and technical assistance support. For those of you who are new to the council network, or even those of you who might need a refresher, the Information and Technical Assistance Center, ITAC, provides training and, of course, technical assistance services to councils through a 5-year contract that was awarded to the National Association of Councils on Developmental Disabilities, and that is where the contract is administered. And each year, our ITAC staff, along with guidance from a wonderful planning committee of your peers, and in partnership with our federal partners, develop this institute. And again, we're very happy you've joined us. I'd like to introduce Amy DeVille. Amy is our Training and Technical Assistance Administrator. She's done a wonderful job with the planning committee, developing and planning and facilitating all of the work that has gone on and making sure that we bring you some really good content that is useful to you. So I appreciate Amy, and we'll turn it back over to you.
You're muted, Amy.
Thanks, Karsten. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us again on our last day of the Institute. I'm just going to give you a few reminders to help you better participate. We will have links to the recordings and key resources for all of the sessions posted on our website. Pretty much everything that we have from the first 4 sessions are already up on the website. We're just waiting on the slide deck from the first session with the federal updates to be available. But everything else is already there, and we're going to put the rest from today's sessions up shortly. They'll be up by early next week. We ask that you please keep yourself on mute during the presentation to help with background noise. We do have closed captioning available. On the bottom of your screen, you see a square with the letter CC and show captions. If you click on the up arrow, you can select how you want to see captions. Subtitles will show you captions at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and a transcript will show you captions on the right-hand side of your Zoom screen. We also invite comments and questions. Feel free to put questions in either the chat box or in the Q&A box at any time that you have questions during the presentation. Our speaker will answer questions probably at the end of the presentation, but feel free to put questions in at any time. We will conduct a quick poll at the end, and we appreciate your participation with that. And now let's start the session. As you know, the 2025 DD Council Training and Technical Assistance Institute was planned by a group of your peers. And I would now like to introduce you to Vanessa Blaze. Vanessa serves as the Director of Policy and Planning for the New Hampshire Council on Developmental Disabilities. She became interested in disability justice during her 15 years working in supportive education with students from the ages of 3 to 21. She's a plain language expert, most recently focused on plain language in law and civic policy. Vanessa?
Thank you, Amy. Hi, everyone. You have joined the session titled 5-Year Plan Development, Positive Practices for Facilitating Strategic Planning Meetings with the Council. During this session, we'll explore some ways to make your strategic planning meetings more efficient and more effective. We'll examine meeting preparation and management, developing ground rules, managing conflict, and much more. I'd like to introduce our speaker, Mary Willard. Mary is the Operations Director for the NACDD. She has 18 years experience in the disability space including grassroots independent living experience and experience as a national training and technical assistance provider for rural independent living. Before coming to the NACDD, Mary enjoyed facilitating strategic planning sessions for nonprofits, team building exercises, and participatory evaluation as a private consultant. Thank you for being here, Mary.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Vanessa, and everybody for inviting me today. I just wanted to say I apologize. I am fighting a cold, so I'm going to be taking pauses throughout to drink my chai tea. I'm going to go ahead and share my slides now, and then we can get started. Let's see. All right. So again, thank you so much for allowing me to be here today to talk about facilitating meetings and strategic planning. I'm going to just go over some really basic techniques. And just know, I like to share this with everybody when I'm facilitating sessions, that I'm an expert on my experiences and what I have done, and you all are experts on your experiences and what you have done. And with that in mind, I will have a space towards the middle of the session where I'm hoping folks will engage and tell us a little bit about some of the strategies that you've used in the past. So I'm going to try to practice what I preach and start with a little bit of an overview or an agenda, if you will. Today, we're going to cover agenda development, group guidelines, some basic strategies for attention keeping, some example facilitator prompts for gathering info, and my favorite topic, addressing high emotions in the room. Example techniques for gathering info and coming to consensuses or making decisions. And then we're going to talk about some peer sharing. And just so folks can have it bubbling in the back of their heads, I'll let you know the questions that I'm going to ask in the peer sharing space is, what are some techniques that you have found useful while you've been running meetings to either keep attention of your group or to help the group really come to those decision-making processes and addressing those high emotions that come with it. So whether it's running a meeting yourself or a meeting that you've been a part of. And then we'll come back to the PowerPoint and we'll talk just a little bit about wrapping up your meetings and give a nod to the importance of evaluation. All right, so let's get rolling. Preparing for your meeting, or what I like to call setting yourself up for success, I think is one of the most important parts of a meeting that sometimes we overlook. And this is really developing an effective agenda. So really important to review your prior meeting minutes. And I think one of the most important pieces is generating buy-in from your council leadership and members. And so while you're developing that agenda, checking in with folks on your leadership team, asking them, is this capturing what you were hoping to talk about today? Can you think of anything else? And that's a really great way for them to also have some ownership over the agenda and hopefully, really help with that facilitation process. I really like to make sure that we're clarifying expectations of actions and outputs up front. And so what I mean by that is, if you're going to say we're going to develop goals today, really putting in that agenda, how many goals are we going to hope to walk away with? Are you hoping to walk away with those SMARTY goals that we always talk about? Or today, are we just going to walk away with some general grouping of ideas and not have that goal setting process done yet? So just clarifying exactly what you mean by each agenda item, and then really allocating proper amounts of time for it. I don't know about you all, but I know when I'm running meetings, especially when I have parents and self-advocates involved, folks really love to take that space and time to connect as peers. I know even when I'm connecting with my peers, we all are in a field where a lot of our neighbors and family and friends have no clue what we do. And so when we are sitting in a space with each other, folks just really like to have that small talk and that chatter. So I actually like to allow space in the agenda for that. So maybe it's in the beginning of your meeting. I think another really nice space for that is when you're coming back from a break, you can leave space for some like small talk check-ins, and you can even do it in a formal way if you want. Like, you know, would everybody like to share one thing that they're excited for this summer? And then that's kind of a nice slow warm up while you're getting into the hard work. Um, Let's see. The other thing about setting an agenda is just to really making sure that you're setting that agenda out ahead of time. I think that's not only a nice way to be accommodating and make sure everybody has access, but then people will really come to your meeting prepared to engage. They'll maybe start thinking about the questions that you're posing, and they'll have some time to prepare those answers. And then again, uh, especially because we're in the disability space, I like to ask several times if anybody needs anything, an accommodation or a support for them to feel like they can be the best that they can during that meeting. And sometimes I'll give folks examples, just really making sure that everybody can engage. And then the other thing that I think can be important when you're setting your agenda, especially with self-advocates and other folks, consumers in your group, is to just leave space in the beginning of your meeting for folks to do some content checking. So, you don't necessarily want to get into the discussion of the agenda items, but just making sure people understand what you mean by that item. And that's just a really great way to make sure that everybody feels like they can be on equal footing and really participate. So the next thing that really can set you up for success is setting that stage with group guidelines. I think the key part for me when I'm running meetings is to make sure that you're engaging your group in every step of the way when you're creating those guidelines. And it's a neat way to create buy-in and to make sure that the group is sort of keeping themselves in check. So you're not always having to be the taskmaster and being the one standing up there saying, okay, now remember our guidelines. The first thing that I like to do is have a guideline that really creates space for respect and access. Sometimes that means saying something like only one person talks at a time. So for people who, maybe, have some trouble processing or, really need to have one person talking at a time to have that focus, that can really help folks be successful. I think another great one around respect can just be that, no ideas are bad ideas. Or maybe you might want to say something like, we're all here with a common goal of creating this plan today or working towards, making sure for me, Montanans with developmental disabilities, have, access to community and their families, whatever it is that you all have decided that is your mission, just kind of putting that out there as a guideline to remind people that although we all have maybe some different backgrounds and ideas and we're gonna get into it today. Like maybe some of us might get into some arguments, just know we're all here for that common goal. And then I really like to make sure that I get a verbal or physical, whatever folks, can offer as a confirmation from the group that they agree to those guidelines. And that's just kind of a, interesting in psychology, we call it like a social contract. So if you can get somebody to say, yes, I'll do that, they're actually more likely to make sure themselves that they're following those guidelines. All right. So I just wanted to take a little nod to attention keeping. This is something I've had folks tell me, so I've worked with youth and I've worked with, people of all generations. And some people, will, oh, excuse me, I thought I turned my Teams off. Some people will, scoff a little bit at, well, I'm an adult, I don't need Play-Doh. Well, I'll tell you, I'm an adult. And I've noticed that when I hold meetings, it's really nice to leave little trinkets around your tables. Play-Doh, fidget spinners, doodle pads. I actually was in a meeting one time that just had pipe cleaners, and I had some really neat, people of all ages creating these really intricate pipe cleaner designs. And there's a ton of research around just the idea that if you can keep people's hands busy, it actually helps keep their mind working as well. The other thing that I like to do in order to really engage the audience is to get volunteers ahead of time for the different pieces of the agenda that we're going to be working through. So for example, maybe somebody will volunteer to be your timekeeper. So if you are working through a really tight agenda, you're doing some strategic planning, you have to walk away with goals and objectives today. Having somebody who can just let you know, like, I just want to let you know there's 5 minutes left of this agenda item. That helps keep their attention engaged because they're watching the time, they're really paying attention to what's going on, and then it also can just help keep the meeting moving. You also might want to have somebody volunteer to be a scribe. That's somebody who can write on your flip pad during brainstorming sessions, or you might have somebody who might want to volunteer to be the walking, I call them walking accommodations, but I don't know. It's like if somebody maybe is struggling to write down their idea on a sticky note as one of the activities, they can engage with somebody and just say, hey, would you like some assistance writing that down? So there's just a lot of ways I think you can engage people as volunteers. And then last but not least, I know this might seem intuitive, but just if you're losing your audience, just taking a really quick stretch break, or addressing an item from your parking lot, which we're going to talk a little bit about. Essentially, I'm sure everybody is used to parking lot. It's just a real neat tool where if somebody is starting to get a little bit drifting from the topic, you can say, that is a great idea. We're following our guideline that all ideas are good ideas. Let's go ahead and put it in the parking lot so that we can keep rolling with our agenda. And then when you're losing your audience, that might be a great time to address those parking lot items. All right. These, I wanted today for people to feel like they were walking away with some tangible tools, and I'm hoping these are useful for folks. I just put some, I like to call them example phrases. So sometimes when I'm up in front of a group and we're doing facilitation, it's nice to have those bucket phrases in your head that just kind of are your go-to and they just feel natural to you, where you're losing the group and it's just one of those things you can pull out. So when I like to call these clarifying brainstorm intentions. So these are just some example phrases. I know there's probably a million more. I like to use, it sounds like you're saying. That's a nice way to just clarify before you write something down that you got the intention of what they were saying. Let me see if I'm understanding you. Is this what you mean? Could you say more about that? Could you give me an example? And then whenever possible, when we're doing these strategic sessions, I like to just mirror back what the individual said while I'm writing it down or my scribe is writing it down. And that's not only a great way to content check, but it's also a sneaky way to slow down the tempo of your brainstorming. So I'm taking a beat to repeat what they said. That means that another person can't be moving on to their next idea already. And it's a way to give us all a second to digest and make sure that we captured it. So these are just some little bucket statements for creating space for ideas and discussions. You know, who else has an idea? Are there comments from anyone who hasn't spoken yet? Are there any other ways of looking at this issue? So I like to pull these little prompts out of my bucket when maybe I have I like to call them a dominator. It's just that person in that group who they're just raring to go, and you're just are consistently hearing their voice during those sessions. So this is just a kind way to kind of say, hey, I appreciate that you've been sharing a lot. Let's make some space for other people. And then I wanted to share just some ideas for categorizing. So one way that I like to categorize ideas, so we're all brainstorming, right? Some people will just write them all down on a flip chart. I actually like to have people write ideas on sticky notes. And then what you can do is you can actually in real time start to bucket those ideas into themes and collapse them. So this is especially when we're doing strategic planning. You might start to have a lot of themes that seem like they're all the same thing. And that's really the first process of creating that overarching goal, right? Is taking all these really great strategies that people are coming up with and back walking them and figuring out what is the overarching theme that we're talking about. And so if you put them on sticky notes, you can actually pull them and start to stick them on top of each other and create those buckets. I just wanted to give a little nod to, I like to call it the groan zone. So just, I think as facilitators, we've all been in those spaces where you just feel like you're not making headway. You know, maybe you have two people who are just like, we're gonna agree to disagree. And I like to call that the groan zone, where you're experiencing that pain or that discomfort, you know, maybe working through those disagreements. And actually, in facilitating techniques, folks actually talk a lot about the groan zone, how that is actually a testament to the kind of people you have at the table. So if you have more grown, it just means that you have done a really great job at bringing a variety of people together with different values and ideas. I just wanted to throw that in here because I think sometimes as facilitators, we can feel like, gosh, we're not making headway. I wonder if it's because my techniques are not great. And I think I like to flip that and reframe it and say, gosh, we're having a lot of groaning and some discomfort. I think we did such a good job of bringing such a variety of people together. So, I think we've all been in those meetings. Can I see somehow with like a emoji or a hand raise? Has anybody ever been in a meeting where people broke out into a really like high emotion, contentious discussion? Anybody? No? Yeah? Yes. So I wanted to just throw in a couple of those bucket statements that I talked about for addressing those high emotions when you're trying to run these meetings. I think the first step is always acknowledging those emotions in the room. And I just gave a couple of examples. There's many ways you can do this. People will tell me if they have been in several meetings with me, they'll start to notice that I use some of these similar phrases because they're in my toolbox. I'll say something like, gosh, it sounds like you might be worried about that program. Or it seems like this discussion is bringing up something for you. Can you offer a little more background for us? And so really the whole point of acknowledging is to help the group see where that individual is coming from, but you're not necessarily agreeing with that individual. And then again, the next step is to validate that emotion. And so saying something like, I can see what you're saying. I get why this matters to you. I could see how you would be frustrated with this discussion. So again, the whole point of validating it is to make that person feel heard, which will sometimes bring that little like, I always think of Inside Out, those emotions and Inside Out, it'll bring that little anger man down a little bit. But you're not validating is not taking sides with them, and it's not saying I agree with your opinion. It's just saying I see that you have an opinion and I recognize that. All right. And then I think the most important step of this dissipating high emotions in a session like strategic planning is about linking. So linking is inviting that speaker to explain how their statement adds to the conversation that you're having. So we're not here just to like take abuse. We're not here just to let people be angry, right? We're here to figure out how what they're saying might be linking with, you know, the goals that we're trying to set, the objectives. Maybe we're trying to figure out what's our overarching mission. So you might say something like, how does this idea link up with our topic on, you know, whatever it might be, supported decision making? Can you help me make this connection? And then again, paraphrasing and just saying, are you saying this? And just making sure that you're understanding it. I like to do a little sneaky trick of when I'm paraphrasing. A lot of people like to use the exact words. I actually like to tweak the words a little bit to use more positive connotation words. So that means like to use words that feel a little bit less angry, like a little bit less like I'm trying to start a fight, and a little bit more like this is just the point I'm trying to make. And then the next one is just the moving on. And this is just a really kind way again of being like, all right, we've heard your point. We've given you lots of space and we just really need to keep going. So, you know, like, hey, we have Mary's idea. Who else has something to add? And just really leaning on your group of people to help you move on. And then I feel like high emotions and anger, it's kind of like chicken pox. It can spread real fast. So if you find that those high emotions have spread throughout the group, I just usually add an impromptu break in. So that's just a really great time to say, it feels like we're at a point where we're not moving on anymore. Why don't we go ahead and take a quick bathroom drink break, meet back here in 10 minutes. And that just really is a great tactic to remove people from the situation and they can come back ready to work again. And this is just one of my mentors who was teaching me about strategic planning used to always tell me, people really love to admire the problem. It's really easy to sit in a room together and talk about all the things we don't like. You know, these are the resources missing in my community. This is what I didn't like about this provider. But it's really hard to shoot out of the circle of admiring the problem and move into solution-focused thinking. And that's really getting stuck in the groan zone if you can't shoot it out. And so I'm going to just touch on a few little techniques on some ways to hopefully help you get out of admiring the problem. One of my favorite icebreakers is a yes and activity. I'm not sure, Amy, so I put together a handout that just kind of describes all these activities. Are folks going to be able to get that? Yes.
No, we're going to put it on the website.
Awesome. Again, I come from a world of, I feel like if I'm going to sit and listen to somebody yak at me, I better get some tools and tricks at the end that I can use. So we did put together a handout for you that hopefully can be useful that just breaks down all these activities. But yes, and is a sneaky improv trick if anybody comes from the improv world. And it actually tweaks people's brain thinking. It tweaks somebody. Basically, the whole point of a yes and activity is to reinforce the idea that anytime that somebody is communicating with you, they're giving you an offer and presenting you a choice. And you can accept that offer and build on it, which is saying yes and, or you can reject the offer and close those possibilities down, and that's saying a yes, but. So this activity, basically what you do is pair people off and you give them something to try to figure out. So maybe it's, let's decide where we're going to eat dinner tonight. And the first activity is yes, but. And they have to figure out where they're going to eat dinner, but they can only say yes, but. So maybe, Cheryl tells me that she loves seafood, and I say, yes, but I love Chinese food. And you go through this activity and then have people come back as a group and talk about how did that feel? Were you able to make any plans? And then you break them off again. And this time they can only say yes and. So they're trying to make dinner reservations. And, Cheryl says, I love seafood. And I say, yes. And I love Chinese food. And then we decide, okay, great. Let's go to a Chinese place where Mary can also get, shrimp in her rice. And then you come back as a group again and talk about how did that feel different. And the hope is that you're setting the stage for people really thinking purposely about listening with intent to what everybody else in the group is saying and thinking about how they can build upon that contract, build upon that idea rather than just rejecting it, which in human nature puts people's little pricklers up. If you say yes, but people immediately turn their brains and start getting a little bit defensive. So round robin is a technique that I'm sure lots of people have already used before. We wrote it up just in case. This is just a way of making sure that if you've got somebody who loves to talk a lot, and then you have somebody who's really quiet, round robin is literally just going around the room and making sure every person has an opportunity to have something to say. I do want to mention when I do round robins, especially in the disability space, I always preface it by saying, and everybody has a right to pass. And then I actually will go all the way around the round robin, and then I'll come back around to all the people who've passed and give them one more opportunity. Whether it's for disability or just personalities, some people need a little bit more time and space to come up with their thoughts. And so I just want to make sure that they have that. Stacking is a really great way. If you have an unruly bunch of folks, I like to call it stacking, and it might be if you have name tents, maybe, when you want to say something, you set your name tent upside down, or, maybe it's raising your hand, or if you're online, you can raise hands or say, I have something to say in the chat. Stacking is really just a way of making sure that everybody who wants to speak has an opportunity to speak without stepping on each other's toes. And then I'm going to come back to gradients agreement because I have a picture of it on the next slide. But voting techniques, I love dot voting. I know some people feel like it might not be the most accessible, but dot voting is really just the idea of, let's say we have our sticky notes that we piled and categorized earlier, right? We can take those overarching themes that we came up with and put them on a nice chart on the wall, and then everybody gets 3 dots. And people can actually go over there and vote on, which goal I like. You can either put all three of your dots on one, or maybe you ask people to spread them out. And then you can take the top voting ones, and those are your goals. The gradients of agreement is a technique that I like to say is used if you're taking the temperature of a room. Like you're just kind of not sure what people are going to think about the topic that you're bringing up. I'm going to move to oh, did I? What happened to my picture, you guys? It's a ghost. Maybe I didn't do it. Okay, well, can I go rogue and share my notes with the picture in it? Do you mind? All right. Maybe I can't figure that out. Hold on 1 second. Oh, well, that's okay. I'll just describe it and you're going to get it in your really nifty handout. So gradients of agreement is actually a way to create a chart it's on a 1 to 8 scale. And this is a really neat way of letting people put their ideas out into the universe without forcing them to say yes or no. There's actually a ton of work around the psychology of, only giving people 2 options. If their options are only yes or no, if they say yes begrudgingly, then they're going to be kind of your difficult person as you're moving forward, trying to, spread that plan out, put your details together. So the gradients of agreement is a neat way of, I'm gonna just see if I can do this. No, that's not it. Okay, well.
Mary, if you
great.
stop the share, I have the handout I can pull up.
You do? Thank you so much. I'm like, I don't know what I did here. Awesome. I just want to show quick, it's not a big deal, but it's just easier to visualize, I think, when you see it. Thank you. So essentially it has 1, which is a wholehearted endorsement. I really love this idea. 2 is an agreement with a minor point of contention. And what I love about this scale is that it actually gives you some, I think they're accessible phrases that help people decide if that's where I'm at. So 2 is it's not perfect, but it's good enough. 3 is okay, I can live with it. 4 is this issue doesn't affect me. 5, I don't understand the issue well enough yet. 6, it's not great, but I don't want to hold up the group. 7, I'm not on board with this. Don't count on me. And 8 is I blocked the proposal. Okay, thank you, Amy. I know that was a lot of work for that, but I just wanted folks to see what I really like about that is it gives people an opportunity to say yes or no, but in a way that they feel comfortable doing. So, oh yeah, somebody said you could use smiley face as like a pain scale. Totally. I think there's lots of different ways that you could, make it accessible. But what I really like about it is you can have people like, you can put it up on a wall, let's say. So you can print it out, put it up on a wall. I've done it before. Well, I'll give, everybody gets a specific colored sticky note and they can all go put their sticky note up there. If you think that your group would be more comfortable with anonymity, you can just have people go up there and do a check mark so you don't know who did it where. You just know that a majority of the people are in these agreement zones, or a majority of the people are in these disagreement zones. And then what I like about that is if you have a whole bunch of people in the disagreement zone, what that tells me is that I need to allocate more time on my next agenda to discuss that further. Or maybe that means that, okay, this isn't for us, and we know that we can go ahead and take a vote now, and people feel comfortable in what and how they're going to vote. It's just a way to, it's kind of an in-between of a vote. It just is a way to figure out, I wonder where people are at. And then another technique that I didn't put on the slide here, but I just want to mention is during the discussion phase. If you have a large enough room, a way that I like to do discussions is I call it stand and declare. And essentially, you put signs up around your room. One says, I agree. One says, I disagree. One says, I strongly agree. One might say, I strongly disagree. And then, you bring your topic out. And it's, um, should we include, this language in our next plan? And then people can go and actually move around the room and stand next to the sign. If they agree with that, they disagree with it. And then they can actually, you have them declare, and you have people say, well, this is why I chose agree. This is why I chose disagree. And then you actually give everybody in the room an opportunity after everybody's had a chance to speak to switch signs if they want to. And that's just another way to kind of take the temperature of the room without just making everybody sit down in their chairs and be tired. All right. So now is my favorite time of any presentation. I'd love to hear from you all. Again, I'm an expert on my experiences and what's worked for me. You are all experts on what's worked for you. So I would love to hear from folks if we can, just speaking one at a time. What are some tricks that you have up your sleeves that you've used to engage or re-engage members during meetings? And do you have any techniques for facilitating decision making or brainstorming and categorizing? I'm going to stop share for a little bit so we can see people's lovely faces. Awesome. While folks are getting ready, I can see a couple in the chat. I like because of remote meetings, I really appreciate Zoom polls to identify preference, mood, and agreement. Oh man, yes. I have an entire handout that we helped put together on engaging during remote meetings. I'll have to dust that off because there's lots of really fun ways that you can do that. There's some, whiteboard. You can do brainstorming on the whiteboard with Zoom where you're actually writing things down in real time. There's some real neat apps that you can use where everybody has an opportunity to write on sticky notes, and then you can in real time move the sticky notes electronically. I think maybe I can pull out my notes and find some of those. I'm trying to go through the chat. Anybody want to speak about anything that they've done in the past?
This
Yeah,
is,
Kirsten.
I'll jump in. Sure. Hi, everybody. We make a big deal, especially with our leadership series, about using a microphone because it is an accessibility feature. And we always have two mics, one for like the main speaker and one that's run around the room. But we've realized that and we show this little video about like the mic, and it kind of teaches people that you shouldn't just assume that everyone can hear it in the same with the same ease that you do. But it also works as a talking stick, so it slows the pace of the meeting because it takes a beat to move the the thing from one to the next. So people stop talking over each other, which is we have a really rowdy leadership crew, and that can be a real problem. So it's had like these multiple layers of accessibility that I find really helpful.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, Kristen. I love that idea because it not only creates space and access, but then, yeah, just giving people time to process and slow it down. And then in the chat, Susan mentioned Menti. That was the app I was thinking of. That's a really neat, you can make little sticky notes with it, and it's a really great online tool. Did anybody else have anything they wanted to share, or I can go back to the chat? Janet says, law enforcement investigators are great at using off-topic questions to change the mood or trigger a different range of responses. A diversionary tactic. That's great. I have I call them silly icebreakers. If we're getting if the temperature in the room is getting too heated, one of my favorite silly icebreakers is, if you had a superpower, what would it be and why? It just kind of can help pull somebody out of that really thinking part of their brain into the other engaging part.
Darcy, did you have a comment you wanted to weigh in?
Hey, I dropped my big one in the chat about an interactive agenda. That's probably the most useful thing we've done because it's just less overwhelming. Yeah, sorry, I didn't, Mary, I didn't want you to feel like we were ignoring you. I just couldn't raise my hand, and I don't know if other people are in that space.
Oh.
Our other
no.
pieces that we use is we try to do a lot of different interactive pieces, and sometimes if something feels like it has to be a lot of a person speaking, we try to have different speakers. I think even just having a different voice sometimes is helpful.
Yeah, and Philip from North Carolina says that they use their committee chairs to do icebreakers based on whatever time of the year it is. You know, most people are doing quarterly meetings as a way to really engage members and then also the guests, and so it's a very positive thing.
Awesome.
Mary is, beginning with group agreements that you mentioned, Mary, to help diffuse maybe some behaviors that could get you off track later in the meeting. Libby in Utah, they do short mindfulness exercises to help people refocus and just be in the moment. And Juanita out of North Carolina, a blob tree to determine which body position or mood best represents, your feelings on a topic. That's interesting.
Juanita, I would love to circle back to that. But Kristen, I saw you had your hand up.
And I'm sorry, I'm in a cubicle land, so I'm like, others were talking, so I didn't want to talk where you'd hear the background noise. But in Nebraska, a few of us are trained now as charting the life course ambassadors, because we're using that embedded in all of our home and community-based service programs. And so at our first planning committee meeting to talk about the state plan, we used the trajectory to share where do we want to be and where do we not want to be. And that was a great exercise to take what we're learning, either, that we're helping other folks to use to help plan their lives, to also use for strategic planning for our council. So it was kind of something new we tried this year.
Oh, thanks, Kristen. Juanita, I don't know if you are in a space where you could talk. Would you mind sharing what the blob tree is? We're all intrigued.
You can find the blob tree online, but when you look at the blob tree, it's on different limbs of the tree, people leaning against the tree, people swinging from the tree, but it gives an impression of a mood of how you feel about a particular topic. So looking at it, you was like, well, which one of these best represents how I'm feeling about this particular thing? So you can present whatever your question is going to be, and then the blob itself, or and it's really like blob figures, bodies and stuff, with what person or what figure on that's leaning against a tree, swinging from the tree, climbing on the tree, best represents how you're feeling about that topic. So you don't have to say a whole lot. You just say, okay, this one, number one, whatever best represents my mood right now, what I'm feeling about this. So it's kind of it's almost left to interpretation, but you kind of get the picture, and you can find the blob tree online.
Cool.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I don't know if I'm offering something we can't do, Cheryl, but I would love for us to pull together all these brainstorm ideas and have them available with the follow-up materials. I think
Yeah.
these are so great. I'd love to hear a little bit more from, so Tedra, what's Fist to Five? Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, so Fist to Five is it's a consensus building technique where 0 is a fist, and so that means you don't agree at all, and 5 is like, yes, let's do it, no problems. Like, we love it. And so what you do for Fist to Five, especially in a remote meeting, so wait, no. So then there's one like, it goes up. I'm looking for the diagram that describes it, and I will email it to you if we're going to put together a document. So essentially, if everybody puts their number in the chat, but they don't hit send, and everyone sends it together for whatever the idea is. Anything that is a 3, 4, or 5, it doesn't require discussion. 2, 1, or 0, we have to talk about it as a group. Sometimes we decide, like the consensus is, people can change their minds throughout that process. Or sometimes you decide, okay, well, the idea or whatever it is evolves. And sometimes after there's like discussion that's determined by the facilitator, you then might vote again. You might do the Fist to Five over. If you're in the same room together, then it's just a show of hands. Fist, 1, 2, 3, 4, like that number of people. So it's really to help people see where you are on a scale versus just an up or down vote.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. That's great. I'm digging all these ideas. I feel like, oh yeah, Janet was saying the rosebud and the thorn. I forgot about that one. That's one that we used to use. That's a great one. Um, do you want to tell us a little bit about it, Janet? Do you mind?
We typically use it as an icebreaker, right? Tell me something great that you're experiencing in your life. Tell me something you intend to be doing, like a vacation or a new job, and then tell me something you're really struggling with. And I recommend starting with the thorn and then moving to the bud and then finally the rose, because it takes you in an upward trajectory emotionally. But in terms of expressing responses to ideas or concepts, you pull an idea out of a bucket and you say, hey, what are the risks associated? What are the thorns associated with this idea? What are the great things that we can see? And how can we build on it as a bud? If this is just the beginning, how do we help it blossom?
Awesome. Thank you. These are awesome. I'm trying to see, has anybody not had a chance to go yet? I saw, Kristen, I saw your screen pop up. Did you have something you wanted to add?
No, thanks, Mary.
Okay, great. Just scrolling. Do you feel like did I miss any, Amy? Do you see? I guess Brenda's mentioned using a flip chart to develop live word clouds, connecting related words by circling them in a certain color. Oh, that's a great idea. And then you can also, in a virtual meeting,
Yeah.
build out those virtual word clouds in real time too.
We do that a lot.
Awesome. I think that's a really neat way. I feel like people really love seeing what they said up on a screen. It's a way to just feel validated. I was heard. And I don't know, for some people, I think it can also just be really exciting to see like my phrase up there on the screen. Awesome. Oh, and Lisa, I missed yours. Use cut out turkeys and had people write ideas on turkey feathers to post on them. I think that's a great idea, especially if you're doing your meeting around like Thanksgiving time. You can do those really uh, different season themed activities. That's great. All right, before we jump back into the PowerPoint, does anybody else want to share? I feel like this is sometimes the most useful part of any training is just hearing all the expertise in the group. Gratitude boards at Thanksgiving. That's great. All right. I think I did want to address, I see Lisa said, do you worry about peer pressure? And I'm thinking that was in regards to the stand and declare game. And I think it's interesting that you say that. We've never really had, in all the times I've used it, an issue with peer pressure. It's really a lot of times there's a small group at each of the signs. And so each of the different viewpoints tends to have a little circle of people. And the fun thing is seeing when people actually change their perspective after hearing all of the people report out. And sometimes I think you can wrap it up if you want at the end. And what I like to say is really, it's less about what sign you're at and more about the idea that we're able to have a discussion in a meaningful way and that it's okay to change your mind after hearing other people's perspectives. That you don't have to dig your feet in the sand just because that's what you started out with. And so, you might use it maybe not even for something really like important to start with. Maybe maybe your first question with the group is not asking about a goal or objective you're trying to vote on. Maybe the first question is just something silly like all roles, all TV roles about people with disabilities should be played by people with disabilities. And you can just pick a question and then people have to, say, yeah, I agree, I disagree, and discuss it and move signs. You can start with like a question that has lower stakes, just to kind of see how it plays out in your group. And then if you feel like maybe there's some folks who are gonna have some peer pressure, then you can decide to not use it for a question with higher stakes. I hope that answers your question. All right, I am going to reshare. Oop. Let's see. All right. So let's just wrap it up in a bow. It's perfect timing to talk about wrapping up in a bow. I like to leave the final 15 minutes of my agenda again to address any of those parking lot items from the meeting. Another fun way to do a parking lot I've done in meetings is I call them fish bowls. So you can actually just leave note cards around the room. And this is especially good if you have a group that tends to have a hard time holding on to their thoughts. You can have them write down their thoughts on a note card rather than waiting to be called on. And if somebody needs assistance doing that, you can have that person who volunteered to be your walking accommodation. They could say, hey, could, Jan come over here? And then they just write it on the card and then you can put it in the fish bowl. And then you can just like mix them up and then you just are like pulling questions from the fish bowl when you have time and addressing them. What I like about that is if you don't get to all the questions, you can always take those note cards with you and then address them later. It's just another fun, like different way of doing it. So in that final 15 minutes, I also like to summarize the ground that we covered together. So again, just reiterating, these are the decisions or the votes that we made together today. These were important announcements that were given. These are, the 1, 2, 3, walking away points that we need to address moving forward. And then I like to really have folks go around and say something positive that they're all looking forward to. So a lot of times in these meetings, we have people who are representing, self-advocates, family members, different organizations that we're working with. So just having them give a chance to give a little announcement, like this is a new project or community event that I'm proud of, that I'm working on, that I want you guys to know about. And then again, establishing times and locations for the next meeting if you have them scheduled. And just thanking everybody for being available for those important meetings, and then reviewing your evaluations. So there's a lot of different ways to do evaluations. I think some of the games that we all just shared previously could be easily tweaked to be evaluations. But sometimes you might just want to do something as simple as leaving feedback note cards in front of each participant to let them rate the meetings. Maybe maybe you want to read those questions together so that you can make sure that everybody's on the same page. Some of the overall evaluations I've used before, but are definitely not exhaustive, are I felt like my voice was heard during this meeting. I felt like I understood what we were discussing during this meeting. Those are ways to check your temperature of the room on how accessible were you, and how inclusive were you. My overall, I felt like my overall thoughts on the meeting, this is my overall thoughts on the meeting, and let them just give you an overall. And then in evaluation, I really like to make sure that you give people an opportunity to say what you could have changed in order to move their evaluation marking up. So if you're giving a 1 to 5 scale or a frowny to happy scale, you can say, what could have we done to change or move your answer from, from what you gave us to a 5 or a smiley face? And so that's just a really nice way to give them an open invitation to talk about what they wish could have been different. And then I like to do, like feeling words. I'm a touchy-feely person, but you can do different things. I like to go around the room and give everybody a chance at the end to just give us one word or statement that describes how they felt about the meeting. It can sometimes just be a really nice way to sum it all up and wrap it up. And then again, always adjourning on time, especially if you are incorporating access into your meeting. I am guilty of being that person who has run over before when you have an interpreter or a captioner, and they don't love that. So I've tried really hard to make sure that we are buttoning up and wrapping up right on time. And I just wanted to give us a couple of resources here. These resources, this one is actually from a rural outreach toolkit from the RTC Rural, and it's called Get Meeting. I'm going to actually share just a minute of it, just to kind of show you what these look like. You by no means have to use these, but I just wanted to have a few things that you could look at. So this is a great little resource that just kind of goes through some basics of group dynamics, community effort ideas. I think a resource like this might not even necessarily be something that as staff you use, but this could be something that you might want like your chair to go through, especially if your chair is somebody who's never ran a meeting before. And then I have just a couple of other resources about accessible meetings. I know we are probably all really great experts on that, but I always feel like I need a reminder. I can't know how to accommodate everybody's disability, only my own. So those are available on the PowerPoint as well. And then I'm going to share this handout, and then we have a couple of more resources. This is Facilitator's Guide to Participatory Decision Making by Sam Kainer. He has some really great, just little tips and tricks in his book. And that's, I know we're running like super ahead of time, but that's about all I have today. I'd be happy to answer some questions, or we could go through some more of the resources if people want. Thanks, Jen. I hope that people were able to get something out of today. Oh, Austin's giving me tips. Would anybody like to share in the chat, maybe one thing that you are going to be able to take away from this presentation and implement? Yeah, Philip's thumbs upping. All right. Thank you guys again for allowing me to share this space with you today. It was super fun. And yeah, I hope that I'm able to meet you in person. I'll turn it back over to Amy and Cheryl because I bet you have some closing out information.